I'm here with Wesley of MOTHS to talk about Septum coming out August 1st as a self-release. A lot to talk about, the band, the music, the record. First of all, welcome to the channel. Thank you very much for taking the time. How are things going with you?
All good, all good. A lot of it's very hot here in Puerto Rico, and so I appreciate you inviting us and taking the time for this as well.
I'm sure it's hotter than it is here, but it's pretty hot here too. But I'm sure you have a lot more heat and nice beaches to enjoy, all the good stuff that comes along with it.
For
Uh,
sure.
Puerto Rico. So let's start with that. How is it to be a metal band, or if you want to be more specific, a progressive metal band in Puerto Rico?
Well, being a metal band within itself, it's tough, because we're in the island where reggaeton was born, right? So, we are there's a very active scene, I have to say. Like we actually just had a festival last Sunday with 12 local bands and about 600 people coming in. So, it's a very active scene and, like really good bands and really good stuff. But obviously, for the mainstream media, as I believe that happens with metal all across, right? It's not, the bands don't get as exposed as they should. And then even further into the progressive side of things, we don't really have a lot of progressive metal bands here in Puerto Rico. I want to say like we probably have like three or four, including us. But the reception here, it's very interesting because they're within the scene itself. There's a lot of bands within pretty much every single subgenre of metal, and people just they enjoy it. They have a big passion for it, and they have fun with it. So you see a lot of mixed bills where, people don't really care if it's a hardcore band, a prog band, or what power metal band. Like, everyone's just there to have fun.
So what's the chances of you guys doing a collaboration with Bad Bunny in the future?
I mean, that would be huge. He's actually having his residency these next weekends. It started last week. I don't know if that's actually a thing. Mainly because we play in English. Our songs are in English, and he's like very into like the Puerto Rican identity and trying to have the Spanish language and all that stuff. Although we were super proud of being Puerto Rican, that's not necessarily translated into our music. Like we're not putting super Latin elements into our music. But I mean, if it's interested, we're down.
I think you guys could figure something out. I mean, the sound that you guys have, and I wanted to ask you this question because when I listen to the album and when I listen to the band, progressive seems to be the only label that I can attach to the music because there's no borders to where you guys go on any given track and with the overall sound that you create. So when you look at the label progressive, what does that mean to you?
It's mostly about just trying to converge our different influences and different styles of music into one and make it somewhat coherent, because there are definitely progressive bands or bands that have progressive elements. They're not necessarily, easy to digest. Like, you know, we can talk about bands like Dillinger Escape Plan. They're not a prog band, but they do have prog elements. But if you, for a typical prog fan, you play them Dillinger, they might hear noise. For us, it's just not having any boundaries or any stepping stones into whatever we want to implement. And like that's one of the cool things about this group of people that are in the band. We have such a wide variety of influences from hip hop to punk to alt metal and to black metal. We pretty much have everything. And when we sit down and write music, we don't really think about, hey, we want to serve this particular fan base. No, we just want to serve ourselves and try to kind of like, try to play whatever it's fun for us. And, this is what's coming out. And, I think that should be like the overall definition of what progressive music should be.
So a blank canvas for you guys. When you guys go into the studio or when you guys are working on your music, there's no such thing as, that is not our sound. Because technically, I feel like anything could really become your sound.
For sure. Definitely. I mean, we started the band with the idea that we wanted to be a little bit more of a doom stoner band. Obviously, progressive elements into it. I think as we've developed, as a group, we've developed and matured our relationship. We've understood that we want to test new things. For example, for Septum, we wanted to be a little bit more extreme. It was also based on the specific conditions as the album was written. You know, we went to Argentina to record the record, and a couple of the songs were not finished. So we were kind of like, you know what, let's just make a quick decision because we were spending way too much time, and we just went with kind of like primal basic ideas into what we wanted to do in some of these riffs. But at the same time, it was just like it felt good in the moments, you know. And we keep having fun playing them. I think that's the most important thing. Like, you know, we keep playing songs and playing our riffs, even though they were maybe written a few years ago. We still have fun with them, and you know, we just go with it.
So let's talk about the record. The record is a concept album around the seven deadly sins. It's not a new idea. It's not a new concept. Actually, I think you guys are the third band this year that's released an album with this kind of concept to it. At least that I've heard, at
Yeah.
least that it's come across me. What made this concept, at least in your view, interesting enough to make it into a record?
It was a very, very basic idea. I mean, I used to be in this band, in this death thrash metal band a few years ago, and I brought that concept to them, and they didn't want to do it. It came out from a article I read on National Geographic where they were establishing the specific demons that the Catholic Church would establish to each deadly sin. So I came up with the idea of like it would be so cool to have a specific painting and like really cool artwork for each one of the sins and represent them as the demons and all that stuff. So when I was in that band, I presented this idea. They didn't want to do it, and then when we started writing this record, I told the idea to the guys, and they were like super up for it. I think I want to say that the first four songs in the album were written in order as the album comes, and with the idea that it was going to be seamless and it was going to kind of like represent each one of the sins in a way. Lyric wise, we wanted instead of just being another record where we would criticize the church or we would criticize religion, whatever. I wanted to be a little bit more introspective, where coming from the fact that we have a little bit of this evil kind of mindset from when we were born. How do these sins are applicable into our lives, and try to understand how we can change our attitude towards them. Not necessarily trying to kind of like be the most positive band here, but at the same time, just trying to understand how psychologically as human beings we are implementing this into our lives, and hopefully that can lead people towards changing their mindsets about stuff. So it was mostly that. It wasn't like like super obsessed. It was a super basic idea. Sometimes people get too caught up on concept albums about every single detail, and we were more like, hey, this sounds cool, let's just kind of go with it. I think the focus was more towards making sure that the songs kind of hit the spot and like the vibe of each one of the sins.
And speaking of vibe, this album overall, it feels at times quite dark. There's obviously, I mean, you're talking about the seven deadly sins, so obviously there's a dark connotation associated with the idea, with the concept. And the album definitely carries that darkness, but at the same time is also very inviting when it comes to the sound that you guys created. So how do you merge those two worlds, creating an album that comes from a dark place, so therefore is going to have a dark impact on whatever it is that you're creating, but at the same time creating the sound that's inviting enough for the listener to not feel completely overrun by it?
I think that's a very good question. I would probably say that it's the combination of our influences, but also our surroundings. Like the darkness side of it is it's a combination of how we're living our lives, not necessarily just because of what's happening in the world, but specifically what's happening in Puerto Rico. Like we get together to rehearse and to write music pretty much every week, and everyone, as everyone else, we go through our personal stuff, and then we just kind of like just let it go within our music. So I think that dark side comes from it. And I'm not going to tell you here that we are like, when we write music, we don't think about, hey, let's do this riff. Mostly it's Omar, our rhythm guitar player. He kind of comes up with a riff, sounds cool, and then we just go with it. And then we that moment when everything clicks and everyone looks at each other in the room is like, oh yeah, this works. We just kind of go with it. In the inviting part, it's also kind of like the same thing. I think this is also something that it's potentially, now that I think about it, it's potentially like the combination of what Daniel, our drummer, brings. He's not a metal guy, so his approach is a little bit more outside of the box from the metal typical rhythms, you know. So I think that also makes it a little bit, approachable. I come into that and I try to kind of like, with as a bass player, trying to kind of like continue his rhythms, but also implement the Latin, flavor a little bit. And then you have Jonathan, our lead guitar player, who he's into a math rock and like super weird stuff. So all the craziness within the album, which ironically also makes it a little bit more approachable than just being heavy and dark, that comes from him. So I mean, again, it's kind of like the combination of all the influences and just us trying to make it sound as cool that we, stuff that we perceive as cool, and hopefully people can enjoy it.
The influences that this album have are undeniable. You mentioned stoner, black metal, doom, all of everything. Like, I mean, this is like a melting pot of so many different genres, so many different approaches. How is it from a creative standpoint when you guys are working on these tracks? Do you have a vision for you want the track to be early on, or does that vision kind of develop through these influences as the song starts to become more clear?
Well, in this particular record, it depended on the song, right? So if we tied it in with the specific sin, we wanted to have specific kind of like, atmospheres. Or so, for example, with Lust, we wanted to have a little bit more of a soft approach, kind of sexy, just to kind of like tie it in. That's Mariel in the vocals kind of like wanted to implement that as well. And then obviously you have Wrath, which is our most extreme song to date, with that black metal kind of like ending. We understood from the get-go we needed to have a extreme metal part in at some point of the song. And so that's kind of like the idea, but not necessarily like, we weren't like, it was never like we sat down to write the songs and, we were like, we needed to have this part. No, we just kind of like the flow of the moment. And again, just trying to get what we felt, and just go with it. And understanding we don't really, it's interesting now that I kind of like, talk about it as well. We don't really have a super long process of curating our songs and overthinking what we're going to be doing. Like once we finish the song, we hear it maybe once or twice. We maybe practice it once or twice after that, and then we stay with that. And I think the song progresses as we start continue playing it live. Like we start changing stuff, That's how the song really takes a little bit more shape and form, which is interesting because right now we have Envy, for example, the last single we released. It's a song we haven't played live. And if you hear the live version compared to the recorded version, there's some different stuff in there, because the song has kind of like taken a little bit of a shape and form. So all this to say that I think the compositions don't really stop, once recorded. They continue developing, and we just kind of like understand and create new venues based on our overall growth as musicians as well as a band.
You guys went to Argentina to record the record. Was that a decision based on perhaps some challenges of the past, or was that a decision based on how you want the band to move forward? What drove that idea?
Sure. So Romaphonic, which was the studio that we recorded at, they reached out to us after the pandemic. They were reaching out to a bunch of bands all across Latin America, including Puerto Rico. And they offered this package where, you could come down for a week, you can record the record, do a pre-mix session, and stayed in Argentina for a whole week. I mean, when we made the math, it made sense because it's like a world-class studio, and it was a perfect opportunity for us to also to go to Argentina and play a show, which we did. So it was that they offered us this package. We just took advantage of it, and it was a great experience. We were super happy that the group of people that they applied to working with us were people that understood everything we were doing, which is a challenge, But as soon as we went there, they thought we were going to be playing reggaeton because they saw that we were coming from Puerto Rico. Where we told them, no, we're a metal band and we like Mastodon and we like Opeth. They're like, oh, okay, let's get to work, and I say that this record is obviously Puerto Rican, but it's also very Argentinian, because it was made there with under the conditions that we were there. It was like the transition from winter to summer, to spring, so it was a little bit cold for us, So all these elements came into play, and you can hear them in the record. And yeah, it was a great experience.
They thought they were getting Daddy Yankee, but they didn't. So there you
No,
go.
no, they were actually very happy.
Okay, that's a good thing. You guys also worked with Jens Bogren. I mean, the dude is well renowned, not just for the bands that he's worked with, but for the work that he does. I've actually interviewed him on the channel. I've had a chance to speak with him about his work and what he does. How was that opportunity for you guys to work with such an incredible mind when it comes to putting records like this together?
I've been wanting to work with Jens for more than 10 years. One of my favorite records ever is Ghost Reveries by Opeth. And I feel like that production is just top notch, and a bunch of other bands that he has worked with are some of my favorite bands. And then, my, like I said, Opeth is my favorite band. So one of my favorite eras of Opeth was when you had Martin Mendez, Martin Lopez on the rhythm section, and then you had Michael Ackerfeld and Pete on the guitars, and having that Swedish kind of like coldness with the Latin flavor and the rhythm. That's something I kind of wanted. I think that the fact that we were able to record in Argentina gave us that opportunity. So you had Argentina in the mix and the recording and the mixing, with a Swedish guy doing the mastering, and then us as Puerto Ricans thrown in the middle. I just wanted to see how that mix would go, and yeah, we just had the opportunity to do it right there. Thankfully, he had the time to do the mastering, and yeah, it was awesome. Like as soon as he sent us the first draft, we were like, yeah, this is exactly how we wanted to sound, which is interesting because I also know like he works with bands that are a little bit more in like the digital era of music. They're more into like the plugins, all this stuff. We are a very live band. Actually, this record was completely recorded live. We sat down with Danny and the drums, and kind of like he recorded everything there like that. So I wanted to also see how would that be implemented within his style, and I think he did a great job for sure. Also, very happy to be part of his roster of bands.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's great for you guys to have an opportunity to work with someone like him. He definitely elevates everyone around him. Let's just put it that way.
For sure.
But talking about elevations and what elevates the music, you have a vocalist in Marielle who really has a ton of talent. It's obvious when you listen to this new record by MOTHS, the what she brings to the table, like her versatility and her delivery. Having someone like that being the voice of the band, does that help you guys as songwriters?
Yes, for sure. Because there's a few things that are very interesting about Marielle in this record. So this is officially Marielle's first band. Before this, she was doing jazz, and she was in a Nightwish tribute band. She did not do any of the extreme vocals. She did not know how to do it before joining the band, so she learned that to be able to kind of comply with the stuff that we were doing before. And she has gotten even better from what you hear in the recording, which is very interesting. So that gives us another tool for us to play around with, for the new stuff. Like now, I remember being a little bit afraid when we transitioned from our previous singer to Marielle, thinking that okay, if we're not going to have the extreme vocals, then how are we going to be approaching the heavier parts? And maybe we just have to kind of like change our mindset when we're writing. And now that she's being able to not only implement the extreme vocal parts, but also doing the falsettos
Mhm.
and like the soprano vocals and all this stuff, like all of these things give us just so many areas to play with. And I'm actually super excited. We have a new batch of new songs already kind of like ready to go. So I'm just excited to see what she will be implementing into those as well.
That is really impressive that she wasn't doing this before. That's really, really impressive. I really like her delivery and I really like her voice and I love the dynamics that exist within it. A lot of warmth, a lot of coldness at the same time. Like she just has
Yeah.
a really good overall vocal delivery, which I feel like matches the sound that you guys have created absolutely perfectly. Is having her in the band now one of the band's biggest strengths, or is there something else within the band that you see as being one of the band's biggest strength?
Oh, definitely to strength, because she's been able to kind of like just do pretty much anything that we have. Like for example, that ending in Wrath, where she's doing both the screams and the soprano vocals, like that wasn't in our minds at all. So, she's coming up with these ideas. And I actually do think that she's the highlight of the record. I think that's something that really adds up to all the overall mix of what we're trying to do. But I also feel like, the combination and the fact that, the band itself, meaning, the rest of the guys, including myself, we've been playing together for almost 10 years now. And like we've been able to develop this relationship where we kind of know where we're going to go in terms of, both the live version of these songs, but also when we were sitting down to compose and understanding, it's easier for us to communicate ideas. There's no egos, which is awesome because I've been in bands before where egos do come into play when we're writing music. And especially for this type of music that we're writing, where, we're just trying to explore as many stuff that we can do, not having any egos and having, fluid conversations and understanding. Because it's not like something like, hey, every single riff comes into play. Like there's some stuff that don't work. But having the conversation with whoever comes up with the idea and tell them, hey, I don't think this is a good riff, but it doesn't really fit here. Let's try it later and just be cool about it. That's maybe that's more of like an internal thing, right? But I feel like it's a huge asset to have for sure.
One last question for you. You mentioned playing a festival there in Puerto Rico. You mentioned playing a show in Argentina when you guys were there. I know you guys have done some touring in the East Coast of the US. Now you have a new album coming out August 1st. Any plans for 2025 or maybe even early 2026 for touring?
So yeah, we're actually touring the US in a couple of weeks. We start in July 31st in Orlando. We're going to be playing pretty much the East Coast again. We are going to be finishing at Summer Gloom Festival in Somerville, Massachusetts. We're going to be playing with Sumac, Morn, Sepang, and a bunch of great bands are going to be in that festival. And then we're going to be playing in Mexico in November, which should be announced in a couple minutes, actually. So that's at least, and we have one local show where we're going to be playing like the album release party, local album release party. That's going to be in September. I believe that's going to be it for 2025. Now, definitely, as an independent band, we have to kind of like be very strategic on how we move towards these things. I'm really hoping that the release of the record, and the press that we're getting and the playing these shows, etc., puts us in a position where people, would be into kind of like inviting us to play with them or having other ventures like that. We would love to go to Europe. We would love to go to South America, and play more countries aside from Argentina. So yeah, we'll see. I think we'll probably know after this tour run ends and understanding what's 2026 going to look like. However, if we don't get to tour next year, like I said, we have a few songs already written for the next record, so we might just also like focus on that and potentially release music a little bit sooner than later.
There's always that collaboration with Bad Bunny that we talked about, so don't forget to put that on the calendar for 2026.
Yeah, if that happens and he puts us in one of the residency shows, then we'll definitely be touring.
You got to give me a shout out if that happens.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm putting good energy, positive energy out there in the world for you guys. So,
Thank
stranger
you.
things have happened. You just never know.
Yeah, for sure. And he's a very he's a random artist. He does things like I do music marketing, so I'm blown away consistently with all the cool ideas that he comes up with. So it will be cool just to at least to have a little bit of that taste of that creative side of his team and his work, and having our name related to that will be pretty awesome.
Yeah, that would be super cool. Maybe you guys can do a cover, a Bad Bunny cover.
Oh,
Also, that would be, I think that would be super interesting.
that would
Wesley,
be
thank you
interesting.
very much for your time, man. This was an absolute pleasure to talk to you, to see you, to talk about Moths. The new record, once again, comes out August 1st, September. Concept record by this incredible band from Puerto Rico. So for those of you watching this, go check them out. We'll have links in the description of the video for the order, links for the album, and all of that good shit. Once again, thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you. Thank you for the interest, and it's always a pleasure. So thank you.